The most dangerous investor isn't the one who knows nothing, it's the one who knows just enough. Let me say that again, because I want you to really feel it. Not the person who's brand new, not the complete beginner who walks in with no information and no plan. No, the most dangerous investor, the most dangerous trader is the person sitting somewhere in the middle. The person who has read some books, watched some videos, learned the language, understands what a moving average is, what support and resistance means, maybe even has a system they've tested. That person, you might be that person right now, is in the most precarious position of anyone in the market. And I know that sounds backwards. I know that sounds like it couldn't possibly be right. But I've spent decades watching this happen, thinking deeply about why it happens. And I want to spend the next several minutes with you unpacking something that I believe can genuinely change the way you relate to money, to markets, and maybe even to yourself. Because here's what happens in that middle zone. You understand the mechanics well enough to feel confident. You've done enough homework to believe that this time you're ready. And that confidence, that very real, very human feeling of finally knowing enough to act, becomes a trap. A beautiful, velvet-lined trap that almost no one talks about, and even fewer people escape without first getting hurt. There's a well-documented pattern in trading where intermediate practitioners lose more than beginners. Not slightly more, significantly more. And when you first hear that, it seems cruel, counterintuitive, like the market is punishing effort. But it's not. It's not punishing effort at all. What it's exposing quietly, patiently, without any malice, is a gap. A gap between how much you know about the market and how much you know about yourself. That gap is what this video is about. That gap is what I've spent most of my life trying to understand, to name, and to help people close. Not because I'm immune to it, I'm not, but because I've spent enough time on both sides of it to be able to tell you, with everything I have, that closing that gap is the most important work you will ever do if you want money to stop being something that happens to you and start being something you consciously, consistently, and peacefully direct. So stay with me here, because I think by the time we get to the end of this, something is going to shift for you. Not loudly, not with fireworks, but in that quiet, deep down way that real things shift. The kind of shift that you carry with you out of this video and into your actual life. Let's start with something that I think most people get completely wrong about money and markets. Most people, and I mean most, not some, approach the market as if it's a puzzle to be solved. As if somewhere out there, there is a correct combination of information and technique and timing that will unlock consistent results. And so they study, they read, they analyze, they refine their system, they tweak their indicators, they add a rule here, remove a rule there, and every time they lose money, their first instinct is to go back to the knowledge, to find the thing they missed, the piece of information they didn't have, the technique that would have saved them. And I understand that. That instinct makes complete sense. It's the same instinct you'd have if your car broke down. You'd look under the hood, you'd check the manual, you'd try to find the mechanical failure. Because with a car, the problem really is usually mechanical. It's usually out there in the machine, in the system, in the parts, but the market is not a car. The market is a mirror. And that's the thing that changes everything when you really understand it. The market doesn't have a flaw you can fix with better analysis. The market is a reflection, a continuous, unrelenting, honest reflection of everything you believe, consciously and unconsciously, about yourself and about what's possible for you. And until you understand that, until you really sit with that, you will keep looking under the hood for a problem that isn't under the hood. Now, I want to tell you something about the way your mind works in the context of trading, because this is where it gets really interesting. When you're sitting in front of a chart, when you're looking at price movement and trying to decide what to do next, your brain is not reading that chart neutrally. I want you to hear me on this. Your brain is not a neutral instrument. It is not a clean, objective processor of information. It is a pattern recognition machine that has been shaped by every single thing that has ever happened to you. Every loss you've ever experienced. Every time someone told you that you weren't good enough. Every moment of financial anxiety in your family growing up. Every time you trusted something and it didn't work out. Every one of those experiences has left a mark on the lens through which you see everything, including a price chart. So when the market is ambiguous, and the market is always ambiguous, that's its nature. That's the environment you've chosen to operate in. Your brain doesn't read it clearly. It reads it through all of that history. And here's the devastating part. It does this invisibly. You don't feel yourself doing it. You feel like you're reading the chart. You feel like you're making a rational, analytical decision. But underneath that feeling of rationality, your history is doing the real talking. This is why the same chart on the same day will look like a screaming buy opportunity to one person and a clear warning sign to another. It's not because one of them is smarter. It's because they're each seeing it through a different lens, a different set of beliefs, experiences, and emotional states. And the lens that wins, the one that dictates the trade, is almost never the conscious analytical one. It's the deep one, the old one, the one that was formed long before you ever heard the word leverage or moving average. I want to give you a picture of this that I think will stay with you. Think about your home. Think about the heating system in your home. You have a thermostat on the wall, and that thermostat is set to a certain temperature, let's say 68 degrees. And the beautiful thing about a thermostat is that it doesn't care about your preferences in the moment. It doesn't care if you're cold or if you're hot or if you're in the mood for something different today. It has one job: to keep the temperature at 68 degrees. So if you open a window in the middle of winter and the room gets cold, the thermostat kicks on. It works. It brings the temperature back up, and if somehow the room gets too warm, the cooling system activates. It brings the temperature back down, always back to 68. Now here's the question I want you to sit with. What is your financial thermostat set to? Because I've worked with enough traders and investors over enough years to know this with absolute certainty. Every person has an internal set point, an unconscious, deeply held number or feeling or sense of what is normal for them financially, what is safe, what is acceptable, what is enough, and what is too much. And here's what happens when your account starts to climb above that set point. Something starts to happen, something that feels in the moment like smart trading decisions or reasonable risk management or just good instincts. But it's not any of those things. It's your internal thermostat doing exactly what thermostats do. It's bringing the temperature back down, back to normal, back to the set point. This is why so many people give back their profits. Not because the market changed, not because their system failed, not because of bad luck, but because somewhere deep in their belief system, there is a number, a level of financial success that doesn't feel safe to exceed. And every time they get close to exceeding it, they make decisions, unconscious decisions, that bring them back to where they started. I've seen people do this over and over again. Hit a new high in their account, and then, in the space of 2 or 3 trades, give most of it back. And when you ask them what happened, they'll tell you about the market. They'll tell you about volatility or bad timing or an unexpected news event, and sometimes those things are true. But more often, the real answer is that they hit their set point and their psychology took over. Now, I want you to understand something crucial here. I'm not saying this to make you feel helpless. I'm not saying this to add another layer of self-criticism onto something that probably already carries enough of that weight. I'm saying this because the thermostat can be reset. The set point can change, but it cannot change if you don't know it exists. It cannot change if you keep looking under the hood for a mechanical problem that isn't there. The first step to resetting your financial thermostat is simply knowing that you have one and getting curious about where it's set. And here's what I find genuinely beautiful about this. The moment you start to see your results not as failures of strategy, but as accurate readouts of your beliefs, something releases. There's an ease that comes in. Because suddenly the problem is no longer mysterious. Suddenly, it's not about finding the right indicator or the perfect entry point or the secret that everyone else seems to know. Suddenly, the problem is about you, and you are something you can actually work with. You are something that can actually change. Now, I want to walk you into something that I think is one of the deepest and most underappreciated truths about trading and investing, and really about any area of life where risk and reward intersect. And I want to start by asking you a question. What does confidence mean to you in this context? What does it feel like when you think about a trader who is genuinely confident? I'd guess you picture someone who knows the market well, someone who has done the analysis, understands the patterns, can read a chart like a sentence in their native language. Someone who, when they look at a trade setup, feels certain, who knows, at some fundamental level, that this one is going to work. That's the picture most people have of trading confidence. And I want to tell you that picture is exactly backwards. Real trading confidence, the kind that actually holds up under pressure, the kind that allows you to take your loss and come back tomorrow without a crisis of identity, the kind that lets you sit in a winning trade without talking yourself out of it before it reaches its target. That confidence is not built on certainty about outcomes. It cannot be, because certainty about outcomes in the market is a fantasy. The market will always have the final word. No analysis, no system, no amount of preparation gives you the right to certainty about any specific trade. Real confidence in this environment is built on something entirely different. It's built on trust. Trust in your process. Trust in the edge you've tested and verified. Trust in your risk management. And most importantly, trust in yourself, in your ability to be okay, regardless of what happens on any given trade. Do you see the difference? Confidence built on certainty says, I know this trade is going to work. That kind of confidence collapses the moment the market surprises you. And the market will surprise you. It will always find a way. Confidence built on process says something different. It says, I have an edge. I have tested it over enough instances to know it works more often than it doesn't. I have managed my risk so that no single outcome can damage me beyond recovery. And I trust myself to execute consistently across a large enough sample for the probabilities to express themselves. That's not arrogance, that's architecture. That's building your psychology on a foundation that can actually hold weight. And here's the paradox that I think is so worth sitting with. The moment you stop needing to be right on this trade, right now, today, the moment you genuinely internalize that this trade is just one of the next thousand, when you can hold it that lightly, something remarkable starts to happen. Your decision-making clears, the emotional static quiets. You stop twisting what you see to fit what you want to believe. You stop rationalizing away warning signs because you've already committed emotionally. You start to see the market more clearly, not because it changed, but because you got out of the way of your own perception. Detachment is not indifference. I want to be really clear about that, because when I talk about this concept of emotional neutrality in trading, I sometimes see people go in the wrong direction with it. They think I'm saying don't care, don't feel anything, become a robot. That's not what I'm saying at all. You're a human being. You are allowed to feel things. The goal is not the absence of emotion. The goal is that your emotions don't drive your trading decisions. There is an enormous difference between feeling excited about a well-structured trade and letting that excitement push you into oversizing your position. There is an enormous difference between feeling the sting of a loss and letting that sting push you into revenge trading to win it back. The goal is emotional awareness, not emotional suppression. The goal is to know what you're feeling, to name it honestly, and to make sure it stays in its own lane while your trading process stays in its own. That discipline, the ability to feel something and not act from it, that is perhaps the most valuable skill a trader or investor can ever develop. And it's not a skill you build by being hard on yourself. It's a skill you build by getting to know yourself. Now, I want to talk about something that I think is one of the most insidious and least discussed forces working against investors and traders at every level. And that is this. Your goals are conscious, but your beliefs are structural. And those are not the same thing, not even close. Think about that for a moment. You have things you want, things you consciously desire and pursue and set intentions around. Financial freedom, a certain number in your account, the ability to trade for a living, or to invest in a way that actually compounds meaningfully over time. These are your goals. And your goals are real. They matter. I'm not dismissing them. But underneath your goals, running quietly in the background like an operating system you can't see, are your beliefs. And your beliefs don't care about your goals. Your beliefs care about one thing and one thing only: keeping you safe. Or more precisely, keeping you in the familiar. Because the subconscious mind doesn't distinguish between safety and familiarity. It treats them as the same thing. What is familiar is safe. What is unfamiliar, even if it's genuinely better, even if it's the thing you've been working toward, can feel threatening at the level of your nervous system. And so here is what actually happens in so many investors and traders who are sincere, hardworking, intelligent, and genuinely motivated. They set a goal, they work toward it, they start to see progress. They start to get close. And then, almost as if on cue, they start making decisions that undermine their progress. Not consciously, not deliberately, but the decisions happen, and from the outside, and sometimes even from the inside, they look like mistakes, bad judgment, lack of discipline, but they're not, really. They're your belief system doing its job. They're your internal thermostat, keeping the temperature where it thinks it belongs. They're your deepest held ideas about what's possible for you, what's safe for you, what people like you are allowed to have expressing themselves in behavior. Here's an exercise that I want to invite you to do. Not right now, but soon. Sometime in the next day or two, when you have a quiet moment and a piece of paper, I want you to write down what you actually believe about money. Not what you want to believe, not the affirmations you've been telling yourself. What you genuinely, honestly believe when you're alone with your thoughts and the filter is down. Complete these sentences as honestly as you can. People who have a lot of money are blank. Rich people are blank. Money is blank. I'm the kind of person who blank when it comes to money. When I start to have real financial success, I tend to blank. Write down what comes up. Don't judge it. Don't try to fix it in the moment. Just let it be there on the paper. Because here is what I know. You cannot change a belief that you haven't named. And a belief that you have named, truly seen, truly acknowledged, has already begun to lose its grip. Not completely, not overnight, but the seeing itself is a form of freedom. Because now you are the one observing the belief. And the observer is always larger than the thing being observed. This is the beginning of resetting the thermostat. Not willpower, not affirmations, not forcing yourself to act differently, but genuinely, honestly, seeing the beliefs that have been running the show and starting gently and with real curiosity to ask whether they're actually true. Now, I want to give you something practical, because I know that all of this, as important as it is, can start to feel abstract if it stays only in the realm of ideas. So let me give you three things, just three, because I don't want to overwhelm you, that you can take from this video and put to use today or this week or whenever your next interaction with money happens. The first is something I call the pre-session check-in, and it's almost embarrassingly simple. Before you place a trade, before you make an investment decision, before you engage with the market in any meaningful way, stop. Take 30 seconds and ask yourself one question. What am I feeling right now, and is that feeling relevant to this trade? That's the whole thing, just that question. If you're feeling calm and clear, and you've looked at the setup objectively, and it meets your criteria, then proceed. But if you're feeling frustrated because the last trade didn't work out, and there's a small voice in the back of your head that wants to make that money back, stop. Wait. Not forever, just until you're back in a neutral state. If you're feeling excited because the market has been moving in a way that feels like a gift, and you want to increase your position size beyond what your system calls for, stop. Notice that feeling, name it, and make your decision from your system, not from your excitement. The reason this matters so much is that your emotional state at the moment of decision is one of the most powerful variables in your results, and it's almost universally ignored. People spend hours on their analysis and zero time on their internal state before acting. They prepare the trade and they forget to prepare themselves. The 30-second check-in is not magic. It's just the practice of making your state visible before it makes decisions for you. The second thing is a shift in how you measure your performance. I want you to stop evaluating your trading or investing based on individual outcomes and start evaluating it based on samples. What I mean is this. Instead of deciding whether you're a good trader based on whether today's trade worked out, start deciding whether your edge is real based on the results of your last 20 or 50 or 100 trades looked at as a group. This matters enormously for your psychology. Because when you evaluate one trade at a time, every loss becomes a referendum on your intelligence and your system and your worthiness. Every loss asks the question, am I doing this right? And that's an exhausting way to live. But when you zoom out and look at samples, you start to see something different. You start to see a pattern. You start to see your edge, or the absence of one. You start to make decisions based on real information rather than the noise of individual outcomes. And here's the psychological relief that comes with this. When you're thinking in samples, a single loss stops being a disaster. It becomes what it actually is, one data point in a much larger picture. It tells you something, but not everything. It's one result in a probability distribution, not a final verdict on your ability. And when you hold it that lightly, when you can take your loss and log it and step back and say, that's one of the next 50, something in your chest loosens, the grip relaxes, and you can come back tomorrow clear instead of carrying the weight of yesterday's result into today's decision. The third thing is the belief audit I described a few minutes ago, but I want to be specific about how to use it. Don't just write down your beliefs and leave them there. Once you've written them, sit with them like a trader sits with a position. Watch them. Notice when they show up in your behavior. Notice when you're about to make a decision and ask yourself, am I acting from my system right now, or am I acting from this belief? You don't have to fight the belief. You don't have to argue with it or shame it or try to force it out. Just notice it. Hold it up to the light. Ask whether it's actually true. Ask whether it was ever really true, or whether it's just old information that your nervous system picked up somewhere and never updated. Beliefs change through evidence and through awareness. They change through the accumulating experience of acting differently and surviving, of expanding your financial comfort zone just slightly beyond where it's been, and discovering that the world didn't end, that you didn't get punished, that it was actually okay. Every time you hold a winner a little longer than your anxiety wanted you to, every time you take your loss cleanly and come back tomorrow with your head up, every time you execute your system, even when every feeling in your body is screaming to do something different, you are providing new evidence to your nervous system. You are widening the thermostat's range. You are slowly and really quite beautifully resetting the set point. I want to close with something I've been sitting with for a long time, something I want to say directly to you, the person watching this, whoever you are, and wherever you are in this journey. You are not undisciplined. That is not your problem. I know you've probably been told it is, or you've told yourself it is, and I understand why. The story of failed trading and inconsistent investing almost always gets written as a discipline story, as a story about someone who knew what to do and just couldn't make themselves do it. But that framing misses the whole point. Discipline is not a personality trait. It is not a character flaw you either have or don't have. Discipline is an output. It is the result of having a belief system and an emotional foundation that can support consistent action. And if your discipline keeps breaking down in the same places, the problem isn't your willpower. The problem is upstream. The problem is in the beliefs and the unexamined emotional patterns that are making certain consistent actions feel psychologically impossible, no matter how much your conscious mind wants them. And here is why that is actually good news. Because beliefs can change, emotional patterns can shift. The architecture of your psychology is not fixed. It has never been fixed. Every person you admire who has built a real, sustainable relationship with money and markets, they didn't get there by being born with different wiring. They got there by doing the work of understanding themselves, by taking their psychology as seriously as they took their strategy, by turning the microscope inward and asking, not what does the market need to change, but what do I need to understand about myself? You are not broken. You have just been misled. Misled by a financial culture that puts almost all of its attention on what to do and almost none of its attention on who is doing it. Misled by advice that treats humans as rational actors who simply need more information. Misled by the idea that if you just find the right system, the right method, the right guru, the right moment, it will all click into place. It won't. Not until you do the internal work alongside the external work. Not until you bring the same rigor and curiosity you bring to your charts and your research and your analysis, and you point it at yourself, at what you believe, at what you feel, at where your thermostat is set. That is the work. That is the real work. And the beautiful thing is, it's also the most rewarding work. Because unlike learning a new indicator or refining a new system, this work doesn't just make you a better trader or investor. It makes you a clearer, more self-aware, more whole human being. It ripples out into every area of your life, the way you make decisions, the way you handle uncertainty, the way you relate to risk and reward, not just in your portfolio, but in your relationships, your career, your sense of what you deserve. The money starts working harder when you stop working against yourself. That's the whole thing. That's the heart of everything I've been trying to say. The market doesn't need to change. Your strategy doesn't need another revision. What needs to change is the invisible, quiet, powerful story running in the background of every financial decision you make. And the good news, the real, genuine, deeply felt good news, is that you already started that change by spending this time here, by asking the questions, by staying curious when it would have been easier to go looking for another system. You're not missing some secret that everyone else has found. You're just beginning to look in the right place, and that makes all the difference. If something in this video landed for you, if one of these ideas felt less like new information and more like recognition, like something you already knew but needed to hear out loud, I'd really love to hear what it was. Drop it in the comments below. Tell me the sentence, the idea, the moment that shifted something. Not because it benefits me to know, though honestly it helps me understand what to go deeper on next time, but because the act of naming it, of putting it in words, is itself a form of integration. It's a way of making it real and carrying it forward. If this felt worth your time, a like takes 2 seconds, and it genuinely helps this kind of content reach the people who need it most. And if you want to keep going, if this conversation feels like the beginning of something rather than the end, the subscribe button is right there. Not because I want followers, but because I'm building a body of work that takes your psychology as seriously as it takes your portfolio. A body of work that starts from the belief that you are capable of something sustainable and real, and that the path there runs through self-understanding before it runs through strategy. I believe that about you. I hope you're starting to believe it about yourself. That's where we leave it today.